Hi, Jeff here with Sarracenia Northwest, and in this video we're going to show you how to salvage a Darlingtonia with root rot. Now we're going to go through that process and show you what to do to go ahead and treat one that has been infected with root rot. But before I do that, if you haven't watched our two previous videos on Darlingtonia, please go back and watch those because this video builds on what we talked about in those videos. So even if you're using the recommended growing medium, your plants can still get infected with a fungal pathogen like this plant that I have right here. Now, it's growing in live sphagnum moss and its pitchers are wilting. This is often what you'll see first when a plant is infected with a fungal pathogen commonly known as root rot. So now, even though growing Darlingtonia in live sphagnum moss, the sphagnum has some real fungal inhibiting properties, the fungal count has to be low. If the spore count gets too high, even in live sphagnum, it can overcome those protective properties that the sphagnum moss has and still infect the plant. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the video, but for now the important thing is to go ahead and salvage this plant. First thing you're going to have to do though is gather your equipment. So things you're going to need a set of gloves, you're definitely going to need a systemic fungicide, you're going to need a bucket with some water, some scissors, and some alcohol to go ahead and sterilize those scissors with. Now the reason you're using gloves is a couple different things. First off, you're going to be working with something that's toxic in the fungicide, so you want to protect your skin from that. The other reason is just to minimize the spread of any more fungal pathogens to any more plants, and gloves will do both of those things. All right, with the fungicides, it's really important that you go ahead and get a systemic fungicide, and I've got three examples here that are commonly available in garden centers. One is a product made by Bayer. This is their insect disease and mite control. The active ingredient in this for the disease control is called tebuconazole, and it's a good product. We've used this many times. There's another one here from Spectracide, Immunox, that uses a compound called myclobutanil. And then this one by Fertilome is a compound called propioconazole. So when I say systemic fungicide, what I'm talking about is this type of fungicide actually penetrates the plant's tissues going inside the plant, because when a plant is like this is infected with fungal spores, the fungus is growing into the plant. So you need something that actually penetrates the plant's tissues to go ahead and kill that fungal growth. Now the question is going to pop up, which one do I use? And it really kind of comes down to many times what you can find in your area. States have different laws concerning different pesticides. So one may be available in one place, not in another, or maybe just general availability at whichever garden centers you happen to go to. All three are equally effective, and there may even be some others, but as long as you look at a label and it says systemic fungicide, you're in the right department. So for our demo today, we're going to go ahead and use this product from Fertilome, and I've already mixed up a bucket of this, but you really want to make sure you follow the label directions on this. When you look at those directions, follow whatever it says for either greenhouse or ornamental plants. So you want to get your scissors ready to go, and I've got a rag here soaked with rubbing alcohol, so you want to go ahead and just sterilize the scissors, let them air dry, and once that air drying has finished, we're ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to take our plant out of here and treat it. But first I really wanted to show you that you look at the wilted leaf on this one. This is really kind of a very specific symptom that's going on here, where you can see how it's lost pressure. You squeeze it, there's just nothing going on there, but it's still green. That's really important because if you look at a healthy leaf, it actually is nice and firm, and even this older leaf that's dying off, it is still nice and firm. There's nothing abnormal about this. But when they start to wilt like this, you know you've got a problem. So as I get in here, what I'm going to try and do is pull some of the material away so I can get underneath the plant and start trying to pull it up. I'm trying to figure out too where it's attached, because it may be a single plant, it may be its own plant. Now I'm feeling down in here, I know you may not be able to see this yet. There we go. Okay, and I can kind of see where it's at. There's some roots down there. And it is attached to the plant next to it here. But I'm going to go ahead and, it's a stolon. So if I can see, there you go. It's kind of going back this way. I'm going to cut this dead one off. And you can see where it's attached to some other leaves here. So I need to get in here a little bit deeper. So it looks like there's more than one plant here. So I'm going to pull. There it goes. It came off on its own. So with this plant pulled out, here's what it is that we're looking at. There's a completely dead root right down here, and that's a telltale sign. There's also some browning right over in here. That's also a sign. And then up in here, you can see what was a brand new shoot that just died, in addition to this leaf wilting, and we've got another one here that's starting to wilt. So now we're going to go ahead and take this plant and put it in our fungicide solution. Now, where that plant broke off of here, it was very closely attached to another plant, and because it was attached like that, there's going to be a risk that this plant as well has been infected with the fungus. So we're going to go ahead and pull it out and treat it as well. So now that we've got it out, again, you can see some of the telltale brown roots down here. Still some live ones trying to grow up here, but we definitely then want to get in here and cut away a bunch of the dead material. Just getting rid of some older pictures as well. All right, we're going to stop right about there and put this one in the fungicide solution as well. You want to soak your plants for at least 20 minutes. As long as you use the recommended dose, your plants will be safe enough in the solution even if you let them sit overnight. But 20 to 30 minutes is enough to kill off the fungus. So now that we got our diseased plants out of here, I need to go ahead and repair the pot and get this all back in order. We'll kind of just patch in some of the moss and cover stuff back up. And there we go. That's kind of back to normal. And we're going to go ahead and put it back in its place. So while your plants are soaking in their systemic fungicide, you have a couple things to do in the meantime. First, put on a fresh pair of gloves. You don't want to be spreading new disease to anything. After you've done that, you'll want to go ahead and prepare your soil media. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and use our granular mix. The granular mix is equal parts vermiculite, perlite, and turfus. The reason that we're using the granular mix is this mix provides the best environment to prevent new fungal growth. Get it nice and damp and ready to go, and then go ahead and fill your pots. In our media, we'll first make a good sized hole in here, and I'm going to go ahead and take our bigger plant and plant it first. Now, what I'm doing here is just trying to get it sort of at the soil surface and not to bury the rhizome too much, but we have this stolon over here, and that still needs to get under the media. I was getting ready to plant this bigger plant, and I noticed that there's a dead portion on the stolon right here. We want to try and remove that. And then this piece we'll just go ahead and put beside the bigger plant. If you need to, put a little extra soil media on top just to make sure that no roots are exposed. We're going to go ahead and get our pot ready for the second plant, the smaller one, the one we originally saw the disease on. Now, as I'm handling this, I see some dead material here too that I don't want. This root right here, got to get rid of it. There's a piece of a dead one here. And I'm also not super comfortable with what I see going on down here either. So we're going to take part of that away. Now we'll go ahead and tuck this one in. And the last thing that I'm going to do with this one, since this leaf here is already wilting, I'm just going to go ahead and remove it because it's just going to be a burden to the plant at this point. We want to give it the best chance that we can. This is going to cut down transpiration. So the plants are going to be in a separate tray like this, and we're doing this so that they will be separate from other plants. Because these were exposed to fungal growth, we don't want to infect other plants, so they'll stay in this tray for a while. So before we place our plants, one of the last things I'm going to do is take some of the fungicide solution and go ahead and put it on the pots themselves. So we're going to pour that around there. It'll just give them a little extra protection from doing that. And this is also watering them, which is good. Once we've completed this step though, before I place them in their new location, I'm going to drain off any excess that comes out of the pots because I don't want that stuff in the tray with our dogs around, or if you have any other pets, or even wild animals like birds. You don't want them drinking that. You should also place your plants where they can get partial sunlight while they recover. They'll need time to grow new roots and pitchers before they can go back in full sun. This can take several months to a year depending on how severe the damage was. As long as you catch the root rot early, you can expect a success rate of 50% or more. So now that you've seen how to save a plant with root rot, let's talk about prevention. First, after watching all this, some people might think, oh my gosh, this is just going to be too much work for one of these plants. I just want to say that it's really not that bad. It's just something you need to be aware of, and this is nothing new in gardening. Many gardeners deal with various types of diseases like this, and you just have to be aware of the signs of root rot and know what to do if you see it developing. With Darlingtonia, prevention is key. Darlingtonia is susceptible to root rot in cultivation, so managing root rot is just a fact of life if you're going to take on the challenge of growing a Darlingtonia. It's also very common for people to have good luck when they first start growing these plants, only to watch their colonies begin dying later on. We got incredibly lucky with our initial colony when we started the nursery in the Portland city limits. But out in the country in Eagle Creek, there's a lot of farmland and agriculture, which means the fungal load is going to be much higher. So it's really important to set things up properly to avoid problems down the line. So the first step is to make sure you're in the right climate for Darlingtonia. Darlingtonia is a mountain plant that needs cool nights to conserve energy and produce secondary metabolites that support the immune system. If nights are too warm, the plant's immune system can weaken, making it susceptible to diseases. Second, use the appropriate growing media, either live sphagnum moss or the granular mix. Both options help prevent the growth of fungal pathogens. Live sphagnum moss works well for this purpose, but it has some disadvantages. It can be challenging to maintain, it requires a lot of water, and it's slow to establish, and while it does inhibit some fungal growth, keeping it alive over time can be difficult. The granular mix has some advantages over sphagnum moss. It's a completely mineral-based mix that doesn't really allow a whole lot of pathogens to grow, but still retains water and creates a stable environment for plants. Of the two, the granular mix is more protective than live sphagnum moss because it keeps the fungal load down. And as of date, we haven't had any plants become infected while growing in the granular mix. But we still recommend live sphagnum moss because it encourages more stolons or offshoots than the granular mix does. For our purposes at the nursery, it's a worthwhile trade-off. Now, what you want to avoid in any type of media for Darlingtonia is peat moss. Peat moss will inhibit fungal root rot when it's new, but over a short period it loses its ability to inhibit the fungus and the fungal load will start to build up. Now, having said that, live sphagnum moss isn't perfect either, but it's still better than peat moss. We've had fewer die-off with sphagnum moss than with peat moss. In addition, if these plants were in peat moss, we would need to replace the entire media because once the peat moss loses its protective qualities, the entire colony could be affected. With sphagnum moss, you can just remove the infected plant and keep the others in place. As long as the moss stays alive and healthy, it will prevent the fungus from spreading to other plants. It's also a good idea to empty your water trays periodically and then water from the top. Now, you should also watch for introducing dirt into the pots. Fungal spores are everywhere and you can't get rid of them completely. Since our plants are close to the ground, we've probably kicked up fungal spores when mowing this area. You also want to watch out for animals trying to plant seeds, like squirrels or birds. They can introduce dirt into the pots that might spread more fungal pathogens. Another way to prevent the spread of root rot is to keep your colonies small, and we definitely learned this the hard way. We used to have all of our Darlingtonia planted together in full-size kiddie pools. We thought we were doing the right thing by grouping our surviving plants in one large colony. However, this led to spreading the fungus around, and this is how we lost over 90% of our mother plants. When you keep them in big containers like that, the infection quickly spreads through all of the plants, especially if you're using peat moss. What you want to do instead is keep your colonies small. Don't use anything larger than a growing tray or pot. If you have the space, set up separate water trays for those pots. Now, in our case, we have 3 of those pots in a water tray, but no more than that. That way, if an infection affects one pot, it will only affect those specific plants and not all the others. When you're watering, watch your plants carefully. Look for signs of leaf wilting. If you see any, remove the plant from the container immediately. Even if you don't have a systemic fungicide on hand, pot your Darlingtonia in the granular mix. Just putting it in the granular mix alone will result in a 50% success rate in stopping the rot. The important thing is to reduce the fungal load, and the granular mix helps with that. If you'd like, you can later drench the soil with a systemic fungicide to help improve the survival rate. And finally, I wanted to talk briefly about systemic fungicides. What we're doing with these fungicides on the Darlingtonia is basically triage. We're just trying to save a plant that's been diseased and treat it immediately. Systemic fungicides are not meant to be used all the time. Disease pathogens are infamous for developing resistance to these kinds of fungicides. So if you use them too much, you're going to have that resistance pop up. We've already read reports from Oregon State University saying that some strains of fungi have developed resistance to commercially available fungicides. So save the fungicide for when you absolutely need it. Use the preventive measures I talked about as your first line of defense. Now I hope this gives you more confidence in growing Darlingtonia. We didn't know how to keep these plants happy until we discovered that root rot was the culprit. But after a lot of trial and error, we're much more confident in moving forward and sharing this information with you. If you want more information about growing other types of carnivorous plants or want to purchase the Granular mix, visit our website, growcarnivousplants.com. I wish you the very best in growing your Darlingtonia, and as always, thanks for watching.